Hello YouTube, D-Decken here, and it's been a little over 24 hours since the Master difficulty has been unlocked for the Tactical Tournament currently going on in Duel Links, and many people, including myself, has had a lot of difficulty with it, primarily with Kaiba's AI. Kaiba's AI makes a lot of mistakes. There was one duel where he activated 3 enemy controllers in a row on the same 400 attack point monster, before eventually just summoning a monster just to run over it. So yeah, it's not exactly the brightest AI, but there are 3 things to really keep in mind about it. The first is that it focuses on power over tactics. In other words, it doesn't really matter what great monsters you control in your field. If the AI recognizes that it can summon Blue Eyes White Dragon, or it can deal more damage by using this card, it's going to use those cards, which is annoying when it comes up, but you can't really fight it. You can only let it do it. So if you set your board up to let it do these things, or knowing it will do these things, then it kind of helps. It helps with you going along the way. The second thing to keep in mind is that the AI seems to be a little self-aware over its own skill, which is if you drop below 2000, it can summon Blue Eyes White Dragon, which Blue Eyes White Dragon having 3000 attack lets it run over most things in the event. The problem though is that the AI sometimes recognizes that if it lets the opponent attack a bunch of times, then on its next turn, it can summon Blue Eyes, which may destroy whatever you're doing and kind of prevent you from actually being able to turn the game, being able to counter for one turn so Blue Eyes can be summoned, which is a tad bit annoying. The last thing to keep in mind is, well, DD Warrior. The AI seems to recognize that DD Warrior is a great card when getting rid of monsters. The problem though is it usually prioritizes that fact over whatever your life points are. There was one duel I had against Yugi's team, and we were just about to win. We only needed one more turn. Well, the AI, again focusing on power over tactics, summoned DD Warrior to do extra damage, but in the process, the opponent team summoned a monster and attacked it. And even though we had Interdimensional Matter Transporter, which could have just banished it, and we had 2 other Blue Eyes White Dragons already on the field, the AI recognizes that, hey, their monster's going to go away if the attack goes through. There's no point activating Different Dimension Transporter. Well, the problem was we only had 100 life points left, so we lost because of it. So yes, Kaiba is a tad bit annoying to mess with. That said, if you look on my screen, I've already cleared the event 3 times. If someone like me can do it, then you can do it too. The event is not impossible. It's annoying, but it is possible, and you can do it. Which is what I would be normally saying in this video, but I kind of first have to mention that about a little over 2 hours ago from me recording this video, they decided to actually change Kaiba's deck up a little bit, because they noticed how everyone was kind of losing, or rather, the low amount of wins that people were getting. Now looking at the deck, there seem to be 3 major changes that they made. The first is, well, they dropped DD Warrior count from 2 to 1 and added a Force Raider in its stead, which kind of helps with in terms of power plays and will probably make it less likely for them to spam DD Warrior, but with the way the AI treats the DD Warrior, it kind of makes me wonder if they should just use Exploding Dragon. But looking at the deck, the reason they're using DD Warrior is because it's level 4 and it combos well with White Dragon Ritual. So I get why they're not going with Exploding Dragon, but losing one DD Warrior can make things a little bit more difficult in the long run. That said, 3 Force Raiders having 1900 attack can actually get over certain things, so I'm a little bit mixed on that one. The second change is something I kind of don't mind, is that they dropped one of the enemy controllers for a Megamorph. Now, Megamorph lets you double the attack of a monster so long as your life points are lower than your opponent's. But it has the attack if your life points are higher, which, if you equip it to a Force Raider when you have lower life points, it basically makes it 3000. But if you equip it to Blue Eyes, it makes it 6000. So, like I said, I really do like this change, and the reason I do like it, other than that, is because, well, when it came to certain situations where the opponent summoned a monster stronger than Blue Eyes, the only out the deck had for that situation was Enemy Controller. But if the opponent summoned a monster that might be immune to Enemy Controller, there was no real way for the Kaiba's deck to get over it, other than DD Warrior. That said, this gives you gives the deck one more option, and the AI hopefully something else to play with. So, I don't really mind this change. The third change I'm kind of iffy on, and that's the fact that they dropped the Interdimensional Matter Transporters for negate attacks, which is very great for situations where you're being attacked by a bunch of monsters and it lets you stall for your turn. But Interdimensional Matter Transporter was a really great card for countering Relinquish, which whenever Relinquish would use its effect to steal your monster, you would the AI would recognize that I can activate it, banish the monster, and then relinquish basically lost its target. So the opponent AI immediately recognized that it either needs to switch to relinquish to defense mode, or it needs to get rid of it off the field, which would require one of its draw power cards. That said, without Interdimensional Transporter, I think it might make a Pegasus matchup a little bit more difficult. But there is still Twister, so there is still ways to get around it with just Kaiba's deck. Now, with all that rambling aside, what deck did I use to actually be able to streak 3 times? Well, before I actually talk about it, I want to actually make a big shout out to the Twitch streamer Emmanuel Fan. Now, when I was having difficulty with Kaiba's AI, I randomly looked on Twitch to see if anyone was having, the same difficulties. And he was one person I started watching. And as I was watching him for a couple minutes, I actually saw him beat the Yugi tag team, which surprised me. Now, he of course did have some problems with Kaiba, and he was complaining about Kaiba's AI, but nevertheless, I saw him do it. And he was primarily using 2 different decks, a high defense deck with a lot of support spell and trap cards, and he was also using a generic Kidmoto Blue Eyes deck, 3 Vanguard, 3 Komodo, 3 Blue Eyes, which gave me the inspiration for the deck I decided to use. So, not to mention, I also saw a lot of the tech cards he was using to counter certain things, so, like I said, a big shout out to him. He speaks German. That's one of the things I should probably mention. He primarily speaks German, but whenever I type something in English in the chat, he actually started talking in English. So, he does know English, so, like I said, and again, I couldn't have actually beat the event without actually watching him, so, like I said, this is a big shout out and a big thank you to him. Now, onto the deck before anything else. Now, like I mentioned, I took his Kimodo deck idea, and I decided to throw Horus into the deck because I don't own 3 Vanguards, nor do I own Ancient Rules. Or at least I got one from leveling up Mokuba. So instead, I threw in some Horus, and I threw in Cost Down, and I also didn't have Birthright, so I used Soul Resurrection. So, like I said, I didn't exactly use his deck, but I did use some of the ideas he had. So, like I said, that's kind of why I want to make a shout out to him. Now, as to how I use this deck with Kaiba, as you can probably tell, Kidmoto helps with summoning Blue Eyes Red Dragon, and Horus can let you negate spell and trap cards. It's fairly straightforward. Plus, the Spear Karibo with Silent Magician lets you switch it to defense mode, as well as the other support cards being able to help as well. Now, onto the 5 duels. For the first duel against the 2 random NPC girls, the biggest problem in that duel is obviously the Mass Beast. If you can stop Mass Beast from being summoned, or you can do anything to it, then you're fine, because, again, Blue Eyes can run over anything in that deck. Mass Beast is the only problem, but if you happen to Mirror Wall or Spear Karibo or enemy controller of the monster defense mode, it is 1800, which Kaiba now has 3 Force Raiders and a Spear Dragon, which can use to run over it because they have 19. For the second duel against Joey and Mai, one of the things I saw him do was I saw him tech in the card Warrior Elimination, which, when it activates, it destroys all Warrior-type monsters on the field, which is a good way to clear the board, but because of their skills, they can revive it back. So a little bit of warning for that. I personally have 2 copies of the card, so whenever I would go into the duel, I basically would just throw in 2 copies of the card. That said, if you can spam the cards out and deal enough damage, you can run over their monsters. For the third duel with Pegasus and Small Boy, which, yes, that seems very weird to see Pegasus with a small child character, but this actually is a reference to the episode where they explain Bandit Keith's backstory, and Bandit Keith's backstory is he was in a big tournament with Pegasus. When Pegasus basically got bored and he called over a small boy in the audience, he wrote down on a piece of paper how to beat Bandit Keith, and he let the kid play in his place, and the little kid won. Which, I get they're trying to reference that, but it doesn't stop it from being weird. That said, because of the change with the interdimensional transporter, it actually makes the matchup a little bit more annoying. That said, the way to counter it is... Oh, wow, I'm rambling. I'm sorry for rambling. Is to use the card Ritual Sealing. For this deck, I added 3 Ritual Sealings, and then I dropped one of my Kidmotos. Just because it's more... you want to prioritize getting rid of Relinquish over summoning any monster. Because if you can stop Relinquish, then there are monsters... They don't have monsters that are too powerful. After the 4th matchup, I personally did not have as much problem with the 4th matchup, but the card they recommended he recommended using was Exile the Wicked, which basically pops all Fiend-type monsters. Which, to be fair, it does work with the deck and it does clear boards, but whenever we got a chance to use it, it basically helped us win faster rather than really do anything big. I can definitely see with Dark Necrofear it working with Dark Necrofear, but their deck also uses Lord Poison and Mystic Kidmoto, which are plant types. That said, it still doesn't help with having this card, so it's still a helpful tech. The last duel was always the most tricky, and it's always the most tricky because you always reset back to the beginning. And out of the two, Little Yugi is always the more difficult because of Silent Magician being 3500 attack. As I mentioned, Enemy Controller is obviously going to be the more difficult card in this scenario, but the way I got around it was, well, was adding 2 copies of Last Day of the Witch, and adding 1 copy of, and dropping one of my enemy controllers for a Windstorm. The reason I'm not main decking Windstorm is because, well, again, Kaiba's AI recognizes spamming cards, so I don't want to risk the chance of spamming Windstorm. If you personally want to use Windstorm, that's fine, but I primarily only needed it for this matchup. Now, the way to actually beat them is to either have them spam their skills and then run over their monsters when they use them, or of course keep a monster on the field so they can't use their skill. Again, out of the two, Silent Magician is the more troublesome because it's immune to spell cards. But again, if you use Mirror Wall or if you use Wall Disruption to lower the attack points, Blue Eyes can then run over it. Or Spear Karibo and Windstorm to change its defense mode. That is to say, Yamayugi's Dark Magician is a bit more of a threat. Blue Eyes can run over it, but you can also use Thousand Blades, which can pop Blue Eyes, so it's a little bit more difficult in that matchup. Which again is one of the reasons I kind of went with Horus level 8, because if you can get it off, Horus can negate spell cards. That is to say, the event again was very difficult, but it is possible, and I have not tested the new changes, but this is the deck I used before the changes were implemented. So again, it is possible. Do not lose hope. And well, I hope you have a wonderful day, and best of luck with the tournament.